Good to hear. Hello, this is World University and Schools monthly business meeting on Saturday, April 15th, 2023 at noon Eastern time, as we wait to see if people will join us besides Larry Wieland on the phone. Let's see if you there. There we are. I think, and myself, it's possible other people will join this on a new used MacBook Air laptop from 2020 that I just got and installed this morning after my other MacBook Air crashed on Tuesday. So yeah, it's been a little crazy getting out the agenda and news for WS for World University and Schools monthly business meeting, but here we go. To begin, World University and Schools continuing to call for to protect people, and in planning to code for all 7.9 billion people on the planet, a kind of abolition of illegal sex and drug and weapons industries internationally, as even kinds of modern slavery too, tragically, and their latent networks of violence. So calling for the abolition of organized crime in a sense. And again, to protect people, all 7.9 billion people on the planet, potentially, each a Wikidata PIN number at World University and School. And as we seek to code for people in each of all 200 countries, and in all of their, for people in all of their 7,151 known living languages. It's a lot of different languages in each of these 200 different countries. So item one, this is sort of an overview of what World University and School is building with many Creative Commons 4 licensed resources. So it's a Twitter post. Wiki World University and School is building toward free WUaS degrees with one Creative Commons 4 licensed ocw.mit.edu and two Creative Commons 4 licensed CS First with Google at World University and School universities, and three, so building in Google Street View with Time Slider, and four STEAM field sites, science, technology, engineering, art, mathematics field sites. And it's there's a Google link to the Harbin Hot Springs Gatehouse in Google Street View, which is a realistic virtual Earth that already has a time slider and is part of Google Maps and Google Earth itself, and TensorFlow AI and TensorStore and Google Translate. And it's, as a wiki, World University and School is an opportunity for all of you and us to wiki teach. And in this Twitter post is also the subjects wiki subject page, which has both academic and creative subjects where we can all teach and where you can add subjects that you're interested in. I think Larry Wieland suggested adding some years ago, for example, green chemistry. So that's a wiki subject you can find there. And this wiki subjects page will, I think, be translated into each of 200 countries' main and official languages as well. So people can develop their own wiki subjects and build on these wiki subjects that are already there in their languages, and potentially begin to also create communities around these wiki subject pages of teachers and learners, of related world universitarians who are possibly also studying for free online degrees in their countries and their languages from World University and School. What do you think of all that, Larry? Okay, good. Item 2, so World University and School seeks to offer many online free to students degrees, including law degrees. And this item 2 in the agenda is about law schools at World University and School and planned in main languages in these countries, the following countries. So the example beginning law schools as wiki subject pages that World University and School has had up and running for some years now are the Afghanistan Law School at WUaS with a wiki link to this law school, to this Afghanistan Law School, the Brazil Law School at WUaS, the China Law School at WUaS, the Egypt Law School at WUaS, the India Law School at WUaS, the Jamaica Law School at World University and School, and the Mexico Law School at World University and School, and the World University and School Law School, which may refer to America and in English, but we'll have to work out how the World University and Law School, for example, in other English-speaking countries differs from the one for American law. Seeking to build out another 190 countries worth of law schools and offer free online 2 or 3 year or 4 year law degrees, depending on the country. Potentially, this will facilitate even growing an abolition movement as our law faculty, as we seek to create numerous careers with law professors, for example, with hiring law professors, as our law faculty begins to teach about even abolition, abolishing modern forms of slavery, if you will, in all of these 200 countries. And possibly as our law schools could begin to work with law enforcement in each of these 200 countries and to protect people and speakers of all 7,000 languages. It's a big vision, but free law degrees could be very interesting to some in some of these countries. What do you think of that, Larry? Doable online in a variety of ways, new ways. I don't know of many online, exclusively online law schools. And whether we build out also online law schools in all US states, all 50 US states, is a question I've explored some years ago with regard to Oregon Law School at World University and School and California Law School at University and School, and newly here with regard to Pennsylvania Law School at WUaS. But this is a possibility too, and maybe World University and School can seek reimbursements from the state governments in all of these 50 states too. Thoughts? Do you think that's an opportunity? Agenda item 3, changing to a STEM subject, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics subject. And with regard to virtual reality and even molecular reality, so that's all a reality that scientists, physicists and chemists and biologists and others are particularly beginning to become familiar with. And in World University and School is seeking to build out a realistic virtual Earth for STEM. World University and School is also seeking to build out a realistic virtual Earth for molecules. And in particular between in their relationship with atoms, so a smaller unit of matter, as you will, relative to molecules. So in this realistic virtual Earth, virtual reality, how can we go from the millions of molecules, I think you said that the other day, Larry, to atoms and back and forth? How can we build from, in a realistic virtual Earth, from atoms, even new molecules in a digital space? And then similarly, how to go from molecules to cells virtually in a virtual Earth, and how to go from biological cells to molecules, and even how to begin to play with these. This builds on a tweet from the Harvard and MIT professor of genetics, George Church, where computers became toys, and when we could all play with them, that's when it really took off, computing and similar. And he cites a website called molecularreality.com. So the Twitter post related to this molecular World University and School realistic virtual Earth for molecules that I tweeted a couple of days ago is molecules to atoms and back, atoms and molecules to cells and back, and at all these levels for molecular reality. We want to go from molecules to atoms and then back, B-A-C-K to molecules, and how to go from molecules to cells and B-A-C-K back to molecules. And at all of these levels, the molecular level, the atomic level, the cellular level, to open the avenues for molecular reality, virtual reality, and potentially in Google augmented reality. So the tweet post continues, how to WUaS play in a realistic virtual Earth for genetics. So that would be at the molecular reality, at the molecular level, maybe at the atomic level here too, in Google Street View with Time Slider, Google Maps, TensorFlow AI, and also with the Flywire Connectome, which is a citizen science project that's affiliated with Princeton University that is almost modeled and mapped a Drosophila fly brain's connectome in its entirety. And as a citizen science virtual reality Drosophila brain project made by all of us, how could we build out from this to molecules, say for Drosophila flies and similar? And the tweet continues, even with film to 3D apps or applications. So this is a direction for research that World University and School would like to proceed in, and is exploring how to do so further, possibly with the Flywire Connectome, and possibly with also the work of Viren Jain, Viren Jain, who is at Google AI, involved in their Connectome project in Mountain View, California, and a MIT PhD and a University of Pennsylvania computer science bachelor and master's degree, I think, too. Possibly the master's degree is from MIT for Viren Jain. So item 4, also STEM oriented, and with regard to aging reversal and genetic drugs, with new aging reversal genetic drugs emerging, and in clinical trials, randomized clinical trials now, and since human longevity, randomized clinical trials, WUS clinical trials, similarly, to over 122 years of age, take so long, George Church, Dr. Rob Califf at the FDA. How about creating randomized clinical trials by sending packets through the mail to people in all 200 countries and in their main languages, and at clinical trials at WUaS for all languages, a wiki subject page, and drawing samples of people in clinical trials, in randomized clinical trials in their homes. So N's, samples from all 7.9 billion people on the planet. And this is a Twitter post from a couple of days ago. One of the questions here with regard to abolition and the possibility of the risks of misusing a kind of packets through the mail for randomized clinical trials for new emerging longevity drugs is possibly something our law schools could address in creating legal protocols for randomized clinical trials for drugs through packets through the mail, and in a way that would even work with law enforcement in all 200 countries, and with developing new law in each of 200 countries, so that, for example, illegal drugs weren't sent through the mail, or we could control for this in some way or another. These are interesting possibilities. Any thoughts about that, Larry? Right. I mean, to develop randomized clinical trials with sending drugs through the postal services of all 200 countries with packets in the mail, and developing approaches even to writing law and developing law enforcement around some of these questions might take a long time to build out. Yeah, also, and Larry's saying on the phone, I'm not sure, I'll put him on speakerphone, especially to randomize the trials and the results would be difficult in all these countries. Yeah, I would agree, but the internet may help with this, and we could build out country by country. I think the risks of misusing this possible system would be great as well. Yeah. But I also think there's probably a history that goes back at least to the 1960s and 70s with law and law enforcement, maybe in all 200 countries, that could facilitate building out an approach to abolition. We wouldn't want to turn postal workers in all 200 countries into criminals, for example. And with regard to even, for example, the Canyon, California 94516 satellite post office, how does one begin to develop approaches and protocols with this federal agency in the United States, the Federal Post Office, to control illicit versus legal drugs through the mail profits and sending and products, and for randomized clinical trials? And there's probably a history there too. And one could imagine that chemistry laboratories and biological laboratories at UC Berkeley and Stanford would welcome an opportunity to produce illegal drugs and send them through the US Postal Service. I think we could build out law and legal approaches to that gradually, and also study maybe in randomized clinical trials the effects of drugs we would like to learn more about that might even be illegal now. the history going back to the 60s and 70s might mitigate or make impossible controlling for sending experimental drugs in packets through the mail through the U.S. Postal Service, but it might open more opportunities if those processes already exist, sending illegal drugs through the mail, to further control the processes to protect people again, abolitionally. That's my hope and thought. What do you think about that?
Well, it's a nice hope and thought, but it's going to get confused, for example, right now with the abortion pill debate. So
yeah,
it's not easy.
Not easy at all. And there may already be a couple of decades of attempts at controlling randomized clinical trials and drugs through the mail with experiments from the US government and from laboratories to build on. I think the opioid discourse, the conversation about misuse of opioids that goes back at least 2 or 3 decades, it's a little bit less than the news, is one that this actual tweet that I just shared builds on. So in this tweet, I was retweeting a Dr. Rob Califf, FDA commissioner presently, Twitter post with a picture of the post office box, a U.S. post office box, a blue one, and someone putting a packet into the U.S. Postal Service post office box. So this is from a Food and Drug Administration Commissioner Rob Califf MD, and his Twitter post reads, with regard to opioids, and these are illegal substances which have been misused in hospitals and similar for possibly decades.
Please be aware, not all opioids are illegal, and not all of them are bad.
Sure.
I mean, that's a classic chemical compounds called opioids.
Right. I think if we can develop online teaching hospitals and online medical schools, we can control for these questions. Maybe we can even relieve people's pains by sending proven painkillers of opioids through the mail. But all of this may or may not be possible, may or may not have a history. I'll just read Rob Califf MD's FDA commissioner's Twitter post with the post office box regarding the opioids. The FDA is requiring manufacturers of opioid analgesics dispensed in outpatient settings to make prepaid mail-back envelopes available to outpatient pharmacies and other dispensers, that could be people in their homes, as an additional opioid analgesic disposal option for patients. So this gives me the sense that the federal government is beginning to think about packets through the mail and how to navigate the questions of opioids going out from manufacturers and coming back. Probably there will be, if it's possible to do randomized clinical trials, even for aging reversal, all the millions of molecules that might be possible to turn into drugs and need clinical trials for, to build a track record from all 7.9 billion people, and as parts of randomized clinical trials with large N's to give, make the results clinically significant, scientifically significant. So this is something World University and School would like to explore, and coding for 7.9 billion people and developing samples from all 7.9 billion people. But glad the Food and Drug Administration is also, especially the federal government, is beginning to think about these questions. Probably has a long history, and they're building on a remarkable legal infrastructure that we haven't been able to engage yet whatsoever, in a sense. So that's this is all going to be, this is all video recorded and potentially will be added to the World University and School YouTube channel that's currently active. So what do you think?
To add to that, one other aspect that's been talked about, but not as extensively, after a drug goes through your body, it's delivered into the water supply of the whole municipality, and everybody else drinks it.
That's it. In developing countries, that would be particularly significant, I would suspect. Maybe the US too, with its possibly more sophisticated, in some cities, water purification systems. Maybe not. So. And would all water have to be purified to make this system work? If FDA were involved in this, as they seem to be thinking about these questions, what happens if the packets of opioids do not get sent back in the required mail back envelope? And such toxics have gone into our waters in the US for decades. People have dumped poisons and all sorts of things into the water system, which already are having their negative effects in these regards too. So there's much history to build on, and from a federal government legal perspective, and also from US states legal perspectives too, I suspect. Item 5. So with the Drosophila connectome and then 6 to 10 species, including human, dog, mouse, chicken, honeybee, how to create at World University and School a research academic medical center in Canyon 94516 in the Bay Area, and for physical digital WUaS longevity genetics. So with these 6 species, human, dog, mouse, chicken, honeybee, and Drosophila fly, the last 3 of which are flying creatures, or they have wings. Chickens may no longer fly. But their genomes, their genetic structure is organized around flight. Their genetic structure grows them wings, if you will. How to, with this Drosophila connectome project, citizen science project that has a basis in Princeton University, how to focus it, say, on these 6 species and physical digitally, so physical chickens and digital chickens with their genomes. For physical digital, so conversation between the two, WUaS longevity genetics. So longevity genetics and also aging reversal genetics. And this is just an open question for creating further an academic medical center for World University and School and hiring researchers. But it's a question that we have looked at a little bit over some years now, an academic medical center in Canyon 94516 with teaching hospitals and potentially even an academic medical school with a warm water cure at least virtual, and an Longevity Genetics Institute, an Aging Reversal Genetics Institute. Any thoughts about that?
No new ones.
Okay. Some tweets related to this. So item 6, so this has to do with World University and School, WUS's United States Postal Service change of address from Canyon 94516, a PO Box 442 there, last summer in July, I think, of 2022. And having submitted a forwarding request, I submitted a forwarding request to the United States Post Office in Ream, California, Moraga, California, about 4 or so miles from Canyon 94516, California, in the San Francisco Bay Area. And after submitting this, they said I had to submit 2, one for personal and one for business. And I think after submitting this single change of address form for World University and School, since I was heading back to the East Coast, this actually may have been in September on my whirlwind trip. I flew out to California and I drove a budget truck back in seeking asylum on the East Coast. World University and School got 4 United States Postal Service confirmation codes and verification numbers. So we put in 1 card and we got 4 letters from the Postal Service with 4 possible address change opportunities. Now, this was confusing at the time, but we've recently, after getting 2 updates from you, Larry, in your home in Pittsburgh a couple of weeks ago, about updating 2 Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania World University and School addresses. I went into 2 post offices in Pittsburgh about a week ago and filled out 4 paper forms, 4 new change of addresses. So responding to their 4 verification numbers and their 4 confirmation numbers. And on these 4 paper hard copy United States Postal Service cards for updating change of address, I updated 2 for World University and School in, again, Canyon, California 94516 for September 1, 2023, in a few months. And I updated 2 with your address on North Negley in Pittsburgh, and in order to open a new World University and School office, a main office in Pennsylvania, which you would then potentially be the facilitator of, and partly for accreditation purposes in Pennsylvania and licensing purposes in Pennsylvania. And then if you were to move out of your house on North Negley in the next few years, you would possibly, or I would, since one of the postal cards is in my name to your house, update a change of address again from your North Negley address to a new Pittsburgh address. And I would potentially be in Canyon 94516 this September 2023, and continue to update postal cards there, U.S. Postal Service forwarding cards there, depending on what emerges. So to these 4 postal cards, post office card change of address cards, I added each of the WUS 4 verification numbers. And hopefully we'll be able to do this all in line next time. What do you think about all that?
I think it's a lot of work for very little mail. Very little mail actually help.
We may get more mail as this system sorts itself out, as people maybe even start sending in money, donations to us as a 501c3. Getting the system right, with you as a main office in Pennsylvania, could have a lot of merit. What do you think?
Sure.
Okay. So that's underway. So just to conclude this item number 6, we were in touch with the United States Postal Service in some emails as well. And so not only did I send in these 4 paper hard copy cards from the United States Postal Service change of address in the East Liberty Post Office to further update our change of address for these 4 verification numbers, I also photographed them and added these 4 cards and a photograph of all 4 cards together, and sent them into change of address at help@usps.gov in communication with some people there. So hopefully they will have received the 4 paper cards for changing of address. And hopefully after this confusing process, we'll be able to do it much more easily online. That's my hope. Item 7 has to do with State of Pennsylvania Department of Education licensure and Middle States Commission on Higher Education accreditation. World University and School has received both a State of Pennsylvania Department of Education phone call and email from a Michelle Simmons in Harrisburg, I think, Pennsylvania, February, I think, saying, the email said, "We're authorized." That might mean we're licensed by the state of Pennsylvania. And you continue to ask, what does licensing mean? Which is a great question. And I continue to observe that we haven't yet paid the fees, the $5,000 for this possible licensure from the state of Pennsylvania's Department of Education. And then we also received a phone call from Diana Bonner at Middle States Commission on Higher Education in February as well. To me, when I was sitting in the car in front of the house I'm living in now, which is, I would say is one where I'm in asylum from California and Pennsylvania. And in that phone call with Diana Bonner, she seemed to suggest that we did have the green light to accredit with the Middle States Commission on Higher Education with offices in the greater Philadelphia area. But then a week or 2 after that or so, we received an email from Connie Clifton at Middle States Commission on Higher Education saying, "We're not authorized and we don't have the green light." So I'm going to read, I think if I can find it, the letter I sent yesterday afternoon to Connie Clifton and Diana Bonner at Middle States Commission on Higher Education, and Peter Norvig, head of Google AI, and Alden Briscoe, cousin of mine at Brakely Briscoe in the San Francisco Bay Area, and you. And this addresses some of the questions in Connie Clifton's letter to World University and School from, I think, February 24th, about how does World University and School proceed if we're not authorized or accredited yet from Middle States Commission on Higher Education. So, dear Connie Clifton, thank you for your emails of February 24th, 2023. Greetings, I hope this email finds you well. Regarding the beginning of your Middle States Commission on Higher Education accreditation email, again, I think I'd like to read that. Let's see, just for the record, for the recording. This is February 24th. President McLeod, thank you for your email regarding Middle States Commission on Higher Education accreditation. As the director of membership, I am happy to discuss any aspect of our process with you. I work with Diana Bonner, who has provided me with some context regarding her communications with you. Please do not misconstrue her explanation of our process as a, quote, green light, end quote, for WUaS to pursue any type of licensure, authorization, or accreditation process outside of Middle States Commission on Higher Education. Representing her statements as such is misleading and inaccurate. Additionally, MISH is not involved with the fundraising efforts of any institution, nor can we advise on such. As a reminder, to be eligible to apply for MISH accreditation, an institution must be able to demonstrate that it meets the following pre-applicant minimum requirements. Number one, the institution must be legally authorized or licensed from an appropriate.
That's our original question.
Absolutely.
Legally authorized.
Right. Great. This is some real challenges. I'll just read the item 1 of 7 or 8. The institution must be, so this is from Connie Clifton at Middle States Commission on Higher Education, saying what World University and School has to be or have for licensing and accreditation. The institution must be legally authorized or licensed from an appropriate governmental organization or agency to operate as a post-secondary educational institution and must award post-secondary degrees or hold proper legal exemption in accordance with requirement of affiliation number 1 and federal regulation 34 CFR number CO2.28A. So we may be authorized by the state of Pennsylvania. We do not award post-secondary degrees, so we can't meet their criteria. And we don't yet hold proper legal exemption in accordance with requirement of affiliation number 1. And I'm thinking abolitionally here too. I'm not sure what affiliation number 1 is. And regarding federal regulation 34 CFR CO2.28A, I continue to think abolitionally here, abolish the illegal sex and drug industries. And even as they are part of, could possibly, tragically, be part of state and US federal processes. But I also think in terms of, I had inquired with them after some tweets from them, and in their MISH's communication with the federal government, whether there was any possibility of MISH talking with the federal government about World University and Schools fees per these tweets. So this is all very long-winded and confusing, possibly for for the recording, but it'll be on the recording for the record, and people can parse it as they will as a consequence. Connie Clifton sent another email on that same day, February 24th, Friday, at 2:17 p.m. Following up on that, I want to read it for the record. President McLeod, I'm not sure what your question is. Let's see. I'm just going to read her email first and then my email yesterday. The first item on MISH's list of eligibility requirements states as follows. And I've already read this. This is item number 1. The institution must be legally authorized or licensed from an appropriate governmental organization or agency to operate as a post-secondary educational institution and must award post-secondary degrees or hold proper legal exemption. And then my concerns about requirement of affiliation number 1 and federal regulation as well. You have not indicated whether WUaS has such authorization or licensure. Note that the institution must meet capitalized all of the eligibility requirements in order to proceed. Let me know if you have any questions. Regards, Connie Clifton. So yesterday, April 14th, Friday, 2023 at 3:24 p.m., I wrote to Connie Clifton and Diana Bonner and lots of others Dear Connie Clifton, thank you for your emails of February 24th, 2023. Greetings. I hope this email finds you well. Reading the beginning of your MISH accreditation email again, and having not heard back from you, Connie, again too, after MISH's Diana Bonner called me when I was sitting in front of where I live at 210 East End Avenue, Pittsburgh 15221. I'll read faster. A little while before your emails, Connie, which phone call from Diana Bonner you write is not a green light from MISH. And after WS had heard by phone and email from Michelle Simmons in the Pennsylvania's Department of Education that WS is, quote, authorized, end quote, by the state of Pennsylvania, and therefore possibly licensed, but with WS having not yet paid the state of Pennsylvania Department of Education fees, there seemed to be a lot of irresolvable, quote, which comes first, question mark, end quote, items in your MISH emails, with no suggestions from MISH for ways for World University and School to begin further to accredit and license in PA. What might you please suggest, Connie, for WS to proceed with MISH accreditation? Or would it be in the best interest of WS to begin to license with BPPE and accredit with WUaS, Western Association of Schools and Colleges? BPPE is Bureau of Private Postsecondary Education in California, both with offices in California. Thank you sincerely, abolitionally, best, Scott McLeod, myself. So here we are. We wrote them again. We're calling for abolition.
I think part of the confusion here is literally you're doing too many things in a letter.
I think, yeah.
Just to mention abolition when you're anything else like that. Your real question is part of it you got correct, but you had all these other extraneous things that I think they're getting confused about.
I'm very glad to be seeking to grow an abolition movement to protect people even from modern forms of slavery. Where I'm concerned about regarding their item 1 is the affiliation number 1 item from the state of Pennsylvania and the federal regulation. And I don't know what those refer to. And I'm not sure what Middle States Commission on Higher Education is navigating in these regards, or what the state of Pennsylvania is navigating in these regards.
I understand. I do, but I'm not sure they've spent enough time with them to understand the confusion on our part.
What do you understand? Do you understand that federal regulation and that okay.
One of read the rest of the points that were there, things you have to do. I think that's what she's referring to.
Well, if something is happening in our seeking accreditation and licensing in organizations that have offices in Pennsylvania, and the licensing process could even have to do with regard, for example, of how law enforcement would.
But again, you're going off track because of the questions, and that just diverts their attention. Your question is literally, what does it mean to be licensed? Period. Stop. Don't ask anything else.
So interesting. I think
something else to quite quote the Department of Education says that we are in fact able to go ahead.
I think it would be fair to assume that licensing might have also something to do with law enforcement. How to protect?
I think it has to do with the fact that they're covering states, and so they use the word licensing because it probably applies to some states, and they use authorized because it applies to other states, and they're trying to be ambiguous as opposed to responding with respect to Pennsylvania.
You're leading me to think that we should skip Pennsylvania. We should skip Pennsylvania's state Department of Education, which I think licensing refers to, and therefore law enforcement, and skip Middle States Commission on Higher Education with offices in the greater Philadelphia and return to BPPE and
for a while, because you all have always been interested in accreditation, but in most institutions that I'm familiar with, accrediting comes a couple of years after the things you're trying to do. And I think that's what they're used to also. So they would be up and they want to know that have you been getting degrees and all those other things, because they're accustomed to people starting without having accreditation and then applying for it later.
I want to know how, if we get licensing from the state of Pennsylvania's Department of Education, thanks to what Connie Clifton writes on early next week, if she responds to us, and if we become accredited with Middle States Commission on Higher Education, how we can further protect people if they're not protecting people with that affiliation number 1 clause in that federal regulation number, if with regard to abolition. I am curious how law enforcement would play a role in developing an abolition movement, if abolition also could refer to legalizing some aspects of processes that are now illegal. And
I understand your interest, but that's not their interest at all. They have nothing to do with that. They're interested in accrediting, quote, quote, whatever that may mean, an institution. That's their only task.
I think Connie Clifton said, even though we had gotten authorization from the state of Pennsylvania's Department of Education that we are authorized, possibly licensed, that Middle States Commission on Higher Education was saying, Connie Clifton was saying, they're controlling that authorization licensing process. My question, activist-wise, even, is how to protect people if Middle States Commission on Higher Education accreditation of us and other colleges and universities in Pennsylvania, high schools too, is not protecting people from crime, from organized crime. It could be that they're addressing MISH accreditation, a bunch of these questions in new ways, and might see that it's impossible to protect people, even with law enforcement, the way the laws are written currently, and be addressing these questions in a completely different way than, say, the state of California would be addressing them with both BPPE and also the the WUaS senior, and
Let me ask a question.
and possibly, just let me finish, and also possibly with in California, the changes of the so-called gig economy laws, which apparently went into effect in January of 2023, which have to do with ABC kind of rules that are easily enforced by law and law enforcement. I think there's probably a lot of hard to call from a law enforcement perspective issues around accreditation of all the existing colleges in Pennsylvania and the 5 states Middle States Commission on Higher Education navigates. Middle States Commission on Higher Education may be navigating these questions on behalf of the state of Pennsylvania also for licensing. We'll see what Connie Clifton says if she gets back to us on.
I think you need a written document from the State Department saying that we're eligible to keep going.
We have a written document from the Pennsylvania's Department of Education. Yes, I haven't printed it.
Yeah, I think it needs to print it, and then you need to send that to Middle States and say what's next. Leave all these other things out until later to get to the point, because you're trying to do them, you should think, as efficiently, and what you can see is happening is getting in the way.
I did
try to do it for a year now, and nothing has happened.
I did send. I think I'll double check the communication. Oh well, Michelle Simmons said we couldn't share this information. She was citing privacy laws and things like that at the bottom of her email, and I respected that at the state of Pennsylvania State Department of Education. So I can't send.
There's a catch-22, isn't there?
Well, it has to do with the relationship between potentially the state of Pennsylvania's Department of Education. We're down to 4 minutes here, and Middle States Commission on Higher Education in Pennsylvania and 4 other U.S. states and overseas, and possibly with all of us trying to protect people, but maybe with the difficulty of how even law enforcement would do that. It's possible the state of Pennsylvania doesn't know how to protect people with law enforcement, and that Middle States Commission on Higher Education is maybe doing some of the thinking with regard to matriculating students at accredited universities and colleges. We're contributing to this thinking and maybe coding for 7.9 billion people and seeking reimbursement from all 200 countries' departments of education, because we would have become accredited and licensed. Getting it right here by Middle States Commission on Higher Education, accreditation of us seems critical. But what getting it right is, from legal perspectives and even ABC and law enforcement perspectives, in the Pennsylvania law sense, is probably under development. That's my hypothesis. I realize you have different thinking, and these are very possibly confusing issues. Any concluding thoughts in the remaining 3 minutes before?
Well, they clearly are confusing, and we haven't solved them yet. So.
Right. Great. Well, we're hoping to hear back from our follow-up to Connie Clifton at Middle States Commission on Higher Education on yesterday, Friday, April 14th, 2023, and find out what our next steps are for licensing and accreditation in organizations that have offices in Pennsylvania. Hopefully early this week. Otherwise, should we return to BPPE and
I don't think we'll do anything with California when you have no room in California anymore.
Well, I may be moving out there September, and it might be much. Sure, and we.
But it doesn't mean anything.
And we don't have anything.
I may be moving to Alaska. I can't do anything with Alaska yet.
We don't have anything from anything moving forward with Middle States Commission on Higher Education or the state.
Go forward with our World University and let the accreditation come when it may. You seem to think that that's got to be done first, and my answer is no. Most institutions don't do it that way.
I wonder how to continue to protect students at World University in school and in their homes. And
well, there aren't any students to protect, so at the moment that's a useful concern.
I mean, there's potentially thousands of students to protect. So I hope.
At the moment, there are none.
Interesting. I mean, we sort of have Mwende Ivande, if we could figure out how to protect him too, in Cameroon, Africa. And if we could get our online educational platform up and running. So just WS Corporation, for physical, digital, WS educational services stores for books, computers, robots, hospital technologies, and potentially even coding for all 7.9 billion people on the planet, possibly to distribute a single cryptocurrency, a main single cryptocurrency like Stanford MindPi cryptocurrency to end poverty, even a new idea for something to sell in our WS Educational Services store, do-it-yourself electric bike motor that would be a kit with a throttle, and even for lightweight titanium or carbon bicycles. interesting prospects with putting on your own electric motor into the back wheel. I did this in the 1990s in San Francisco. Batteries weren't working, but this could be a way to help students with mobility questions, and also grow our educational services stores.
First
And
question that comes to my mind is, are they authorized to be on the street?
yeah, there are class 1 and class 2 bicycles can only go in the United States 20 miles per hour. Class 3 bicycles can go 28 miles per hour. So yes, there's thinking about that. Could we get into the design and building of both a do-it-yourself motor with throttle and a titanium or carbon, very lightweight bicycle as a process of our own design processes? Stay tuned.
Okay.
Item 2, Stanford MindPi cryptocurrency for free money daily for 7.9 billion people, each a Wikidata PIN number to end poverty. So we've been through this before, but all of these next 3 organizations have something, I think, to do to proceed with developing in the state of California and with the state of California's franchise tax board. So WUaS Corporation is furthering our relationship with the CA, California Franchise Tax Board. StanfordMindPi.com is developing its I think would possibly be developing its relationship with the state of California's Franchise Tax Board. And we got that email from StanfordMindPi.com about partnering with them, nothing following up on that. And the WUaS Corporation is seeking to list on the Silicon Valley long-term stock exchange in California, a new stock exchange. And I'm hypothesizing that they would be having something to do with the state of California's Franchise Tax Board too. So we're waiting on all of that. Thoughts before we close?
I'm waiting as far as I can tell.
Yep. Hoping that legal processes can help with all of the above and that our 200 law schools grow and work with law enforcement to help protect people. And thanks, Larry.
Okay. Talk to you again.
Talk to you again. Bye for now. Take
Bye.
care.